When Seikyou and his faction were first completely annihilated by the Sei and Yotowa alliance, it seemed as though this might be it for him in the story. However, as time went on, it became clear that this was simply a misdirection by Hara, as Seikyou actually went on to make a huge return and be a far more significant character than many readers would have expected. There was in fact a plan for this character from the beginning, and the plan required him to lose here at the start of the story, specifically to Sei, to start his path to redemption. If we break down all the themes, dialogue, and messaging surrounding Seikyou from his very introduction in the story, it is obvious it has always led to this point in his final arc as the catalyst for change. Hara in fact crafted his character arc in such a specific way, guaranteeing Seikyou's great significance in the story, a meticulous character arc for him to grow, and a distinct thematic purpose, not only for his final arc and those following, but in framing Sei's story in general. Most importantly, all of this further highlights the though short-lived resurgence of a stronger changed man by the end of his journey, a character that readers have come to love and resonate with, who has a much more important hidden role for the final conflicts of Kingdom than we all realized at first. To begin with, why isn't it surprising that Seikyou's story wasn't over immediately? Well, as we continue to move closer to the first monumental step towards unification, being the destruction of Han, it has become quite clear that Hara has always had significant plans for all his notable side characters in Kingdom. Recent arcs have seen Hara suddenly focus on these characters, beginning to reveal their major character arcs and story roles. The Han campaign already has by far been one of the most significant arcs for these side characters, setting Kyokai and Toa for major character storylines for Kingdom's final half, and most importantly, none of these storylines coming out of nowhere, rather reflecting Hara's long-term genius planning for where these character arcs would be going and the roles that they would be playing from way earlier in the story. See, this makes sense for characters like Kyokai and To. What about Seikyou? Seikyou definitely stands out as an exception, whose story seemingly meets a sudden end sadly before it could even start, with Hara not having any final narrative planned for him. If his imprisonment truly was the end for him, that would mean in the entirety of Kingdom's 800 chapters, Seikyou would be the only one of Hara's notable side characters that he for some reason genuinely never had a plan for in the grander scheme of the story. So it was highly unlikely from the start that Seikyou would be a random exception to Hara's clear planning. Okay, maybe some people would like to argue that Seikyou's only purpose was to exist as a failed version of Sei, and that's why it was always his destiny to be taken out immediately and so suddenly, with no further story in mind. While there is merit to that concept, there are pieces of storytelling that make it less likely that his only role was to be the villainous brat to highlight how much better Sei is. But more importantly, while the purpose of Seikyou was to contrast with Sei in many ways, all signs point to the real substance of this thematic contrast being deeper, as it's something some readers don't seem to realize lies at the heart of Seikyou's redemption arc. But before we get into that, we need to establish a couple major clues to Seikyou's redemption. First is that Hara deliberately gave Seikyou an elaborate out to his failed rebellion. See, Seikyou is a pureblood royal who failed miserably to reclaim in his eyes his rightful throne, and his entire entourage got decimated. Hara gave us every reason to believe that Seikyou and his faction were done for, right? Except that isn't true, because Hara planted a surprisingly obvious out by letting Seikyou live and having Sei rationalize his actions as those of someone simply who has always been alone. And this loneliness is specifically the one thing that Sei truly understands the most out of everybody. This is the one thing that was established to us about Seikyou in great detail and led us to believe why he had this one singular hated mortal enemy, and that is anyone that would sully the untainted royal bloodline, or in actuality, the untainted memory of his mother, the untainted memory of a world where his loving mother was still present and he was the one beloved by all for Chin's peace and prosperity. It just so happened to be a world before that bastard Sei entered his life. This is essentially the entire backstory devoted to establishing the hatred that Seikyou initially harbored towards Sei, and it is so funny because Ryofui, the greatest enemy of Sei, could not have been defeated without none other than him, Seikyou. And so Hara played up this huge conflict between Seikyou and Sei, which seemed at first to be a petty squabble between siblings and seemingly not relevant in the actual grander plot, except turns out it really was relevant all along, because this was necessary for Seikyou's eventual redemption, establishing Ryofui as Sei's enemy, who is then defeated with the major help of Seikyou, creates a reason for why Sei would then save Seikyou in his greatest hour of need, when he is framed for rebelling against Chin. It also provides a further connection redemption potentially between Seikyou and SHIN as his final arc wraps up, seeing as SHIN serves as Sei's sword. It makes a lot more sense than readers realize for Sei to save Seikyou during the confusing battle of Tonryu. It would be out of character for any Honorable Kingdom character to not do so, considering such a big deal was made of the long-standing animosity between Sei and Ryufui, and Seikyou was the sole reason why Sei didn't lose out immediately. This is why Hara planted this specific out for Seikyou way back then. He was defeated and seemingly subject to eternal imprisonment, but it was done specifically at the start of Sei's journey to set up this situation, a situation where Sei would eventually and surprisingly be greatly indebted to Seikyou. No one could have predicted this. It is why in Seikyou's final arc, when he is beaten and on his last legs, readers have come to love him and see him as an actual human who grew to genuinely support Sei and his claim instead of being the devil he was fiending for the throne at the beginning. The second major clue to Seikyou's redemption was the nature of his defeat. While Seikyou and his faction were annihilated and humbled, this defeat would go on to spark a legendary period of growth, a period of growth as drastic as the terrible loss that Seikyou had just experienced. But the most notable clue to his redemption is the simple fact that Seikyou's final arc has always been planned to be tied to a Sei-centric arc. It is not by any means a coincidence that his arc comes right before the State of Eye arc, or in other words, Sei's arc. Now, all early signs point to Seikyou's planned storyline always having been tied to Sei, the king that Seikyou had been intending to take down from the start of the story, the one that made his life miserable at every turn. But it actually goes deeper than that. Seikyou's character design seems to have been based around making him a twisted version of Sei. Sei's most iconic trait is his eyes, or rather the fierce light that his wide eyes emit, and Seikyou is the opposite. Narrow eyes that speak of nothing but towering privilege. Look at their drip. Sei dresses rather humble for a king, while Seikyou clearly comes from royalty and wears only the grandest attire. It's kinda crazy that there is such a cool parallel between Sei and Seikyou in design, though a major writing piece that readers seem to miss is their opposite defining philosophies that match this parallel in design. In the State of Eye arc, the single most important trait established about Sei was that he will not believe for a second that the true nature of humans is not that of light. Sei understands that this light isn't unique to exceptional individuals. Shika, the one who saved him, only knew him for a couple days and still displayed a strength and compassion like no other. But Jukio also gave us this same light, and so did Oki, and so did Seikyou at his end. This was the same powerful lesson Sei passed on to all those he encountered, that everyone has this light within them, but at times fall to the darkness because they lose sight of their true nature. Now, Seikyou is specifically introduced to us from the start as having the exact opposite philosophy to Sei, whereas we learn from Sei that humans give off a furious light at the end of their path, which others inherit to then pass on to others as part of a cycle. Seikyou is infamous for not believing this, but rather believes the nature of humans is to be evil from the moment they are born. This is the real contrast between Sei and Seikyou that was at the core of their character dynamic. Sei understood what he learned from Shika, that a complete stranger could lay down their life simply because they believe in them. One's virtue and belief in this light within humans is all that matters. That is what gives life weight. Seikyou, on the other hand, took a long time to learn this lesson. For the longest time, he refused to accept that the true nature of humans was not to be evil, or serve self-interest, or trample over others. He stooped to petty violence every chance he could, violence that, interestingly enough, actually put him ahead of Sei in the original battle for the throne. But the question was always, who will actually be ahead in the end? Who was truly walking the path of the king? So herein lies Seikyou's true potential, written from the very start. Turns out, Seikyou has the same ambition and guts as Sei, but he lacked the morals, wisdom, and nuance of Shika. Seikyou at first lacked the crucial elements that Sei learned from Shika, that make Sei a far better king than Seikyou. If Sei had never met Shika, he may have very well grown up to be just as twisted and broken himself, perhaps also seeing himself as above those unworthy of heaven's blessing, because as Sei once believed, everyone and everything belittling him was only natural. These people were meant to be evil from birth. This is the real difference between the two characters. The entire point is this contrast between Seikyou and Sei really goes back to the contrast between Seikyou and Shika, as Shika is the one that preached Sei's philosophy in the first place. And this is exactly why from the beginning, Seikyou's main character storyline was always planned to be tied to a Sei-centric arc. Seikyou was always planned as a wish version of Sei, another child desperate for the throne with eyes to match their ambition but defined by darkness, while Sei's is by light. It's easy for many readers to think that Seikyou's concept is basically Sei if he didn't walk down the right path, which is technically true, but does not carry thematic weight. The actual point of Seikyou is that he is Sei if Sei never met Shika. It is why Seikyou was created from the start to beautifully set up a Sei-centric storyline, because in the first arc, which set up the foundation for Sei's story, Hara used this character as the perfect foil to bring out these themes in their storylines: duty, humanity, redemption. Ultimately, when Hara first birthed Seikyou, I think he really did always have a character arc planned for him with a future Sei-centric storyline in mind, but maybe he didn't come up with the specific details on how to develop him straight away. That aside, the main question is, what did Seikyou's final arc end up looking like with all of this being said? Well, let's break down the ultimate fate of his character. As I mentioned earlier, the real difference between Seikyou and Sei came down to the moral teachings that Sei learned in comparison to Seikyou. Seikyou's real growth was a change in perspective. The biggest thing separating him from the path that Sei walks were the emotional violent outbursts. Seikyou's path to picking himself back up and learning something in the process was definitely an emotionally powerful one. As one way where Seikyou is similar to Sei is that he also greatly values the unmatched strength of a king, one who was unparalleled when it comes to rousing the kingdom. No matter the mountain that stands before Sei, he is always able to maintain his mental fortitude and keep moving forward without hesitation. Seikyou ended up being similar by the end of his journey, and it was none other than Sei that encouraged this legendary growth, this atonement, a second chance. By Sei taking this chance on Seikyou, it ended up benefiting all parties, but Seikyou the most. Who would have thought that the Seikyou of today would inspire such a great level of loyalty from the people, that he would completely ignore someone who was trying to tempt him with overthrowing Sei and placing him on the throne, that with his last breath, admitted that he would still have pushed for China's unification if Sei were to somehow give up this path. His whole sacrifice is a testament to this. Countless wounds and retainers dying before his eyes, and still, he picks himself back up and keeps moving forward without hesitation. Honestly, such a strong character arc for Seikyou, to the point that Hara gave us many reasons to actually like and care deeply about this character. All in all, Seikyou's character arc matters and isn't random at all. From his very introduction, it was always planned to build up and strengthen Sei's storyline during the State of Eye arc, where Sei would have no more doubt in his mind to trust in his view on true human nature as light, as he continues to believe in this view in his seemingly impossible quest of unifying all of China, by contrasting with Seikyou's past philosophy. But at the same time, Hara gave birth to a character that ended up being loved as much as he was hated. Anyways, thank you for tuning in. Let me know what you guys thought about the redemption of Seikyou in the comment section below. Did you enjoy this video? Check out my other videos. Be sure to subscribe and ring the bell to stay updated on my latest videos. I appreciate you guys.